Alright, this is my buck from Jaggers, December 16th, 2015. My biggest buck to date. It didn't start on December 16th. It started December 1st and 2nd, which was the opening day of muzzleloader. We went to Jaggers, a farm that my dad and my family have been hunting for 30 years. So we've kind of had some set spots over the years, and my dad dropped me off to set up our stands. So I walked in, set up my stand. He went up to the house to talk to Mr. Jaggard. So I started to walk up the lane back to the house, and in the hayfield I can hear deer running. So I stopped to look, and a doe went right past, right across one of the runs, and right behind her all I see is horns coming through the brush. So I slid behind a tree and I'm sitting there waiting, and the buck walked up to the run, stopped at 10 yards, and just turned and looked. Steam coming out of his nose, mouth open, breathing heavy, and he stood there. It felt like an hour, and then he just walked away following the doe, and that was it. So I ran up to the house to tell my dad. So now we were all excited, ready for muzzleloader season to start, and couldn't wait to get in the woods. So opening day muzzleloader comes. I get dropped off at dark. Don't see a deer all day, until just at last light I see a little spike at like 40 yards, and usually we're not waiting for a big deer. A deer is a deer to us. So I'm got the scope on him, I'm ready to shoot if I want to, and then I just think of the buck I seen in the field the day before. So I pass, and the night's over. We got one more day of early muzzleloader. I sit the next day, not a deer, no spike or anything all day. So now we're getting ready for shotgun season, which is December 8th, and the same thing, sit the opening morning, not a deer. Right until dark, coming behind me I hear crashing coming across the creek. So I turn around and I see just horns coming. I'm not sure if it was this buck or just another nice buck. And he was walking to my right, so I had to turn around the stand and tried to get the gun lefty, but I use a 10 gauge double barrel Casner, a Churchill, and it's so long, 32-inch barrels, it was hard for me to get wrapped around the tree in time, and he was starting to walk back along the creek, and it was too far and it wasn't a good shot. So I passed on it and went on the rest of the week and didn't see any deer, but maybe one or two does. All week long I was having it's a big long road that's off of a main highway, so you get a lot of people using it as like a cut through, and all day long I would have people walking up and down the road. I had one lady, I think, singing and jogging. I had another person go down the road on a lawnmower, and he never came back. He just went the one way and never came back. About a 6-mile road. And just had activity all day of people, no deer. Well, as this is all going on, my dad's texting me and telling me later at night when we pick me up that he's seeing deer all day. Little bucks, does, everything. He was like he was in a preserve. So I don't believe him. So we go the whole week until Saturday. And Saturday, same thing, I sit, not a deer, and right at dark, my dad starts to see a deer come out. These deer were funneling out of the field. There's a big hay field, which has, one side is a lot of grass and honeysuckle, and on the other side it's just big patch of briars. So all these deer were funneling out of the briars, and they would go to a persimmons tree. So right at dark, he sees a big body deer come to the persimmons and then walk on a 45 away across the grass field. So he brought the slug gun that day, so he put the scope up and he can see I guess the light caught the rack just the right way and he could see the horns. So he knew it was a good buck, but the deer was walking straight away from him. He was going to take the shot, but we had a storm coming in the next day, so he didn't want to risk it and lose the blood trail and end up losing the deer. So he let the deer go. So now we talked about it. He knew it was a good buck. We were pretty sure it was the buck that I seen in the field before the early muzzleloader. So it was, I think it was 1 or 2 days you couldn't hunt, and then it starts up with doe day. We weren't planning on going doe day, but the neighboring property, they always try and sneak into ours to make pushes. So if we don't have a car out on the road to show that we're there, they try and sneak in. So I went and bought a buck tag. We were trying to figure out how could I hunt the field but get into a place where I can hunt the persimmons tree to watch where they're funneling into. So that morning I brought a climber in and hunted in my spot, and not a deer. They were making drives and no deer even came in. So my dad was sitting in the driveway trying to figure out where I could go with the climber and couldn't find anything. So he picks me up at lunch. We're eating in the driveway and we're talking about what tree could I get up in and what would be the best place for me to set up for the night. So every tree that's in the driveway is either too fat or too skinny, and they have too many limbs for me to use the climber. So we start looking at this one. We think it's a mulberry tree and has all the branches that hang over top, and we're trying to see if I could climb it. So my dad drops me off at the tree and he wants me to see if I can climb up. So I grab up, pull myself up, and I get to the top, and I think it'll work. I have to sit straddling a limb with my back in like the crotch of the tree. So we figure that's my best bet, and it gives me one shot of where these deer have been funneling into across this grass field into this briar patch and honeysuckle. And we thought it was a little bit over 50 yards. So around 2 o'clock, I wanted to get in there pretty early to make sure I didn't spook anything, even though the deer were only moving right before dark. So I walk down the driveway, just bring the gun, my mask, my GoPro, and that's it. So I tie my gun up to my wrist, I pull myself up and head on up the tree, get settled and pull Bertha up, and it wasn't about 30 minutes later I see a deer coming across the field straight at me, and I could see horns right away. He gets to about 70 yards. I could see it's a nice wide buck, pretty high, and he walks to my left and just keeps funneling right behind the house. So that was nice to finally see a deer that was moving pretty early, so I was having a good feeling that I was going to see a lot of deer. And it was about 30 minutes later, here comes a whole bunch of deer. I see legs coming from about the same place out of the field, and it was 3 does and another little buck, a little spike. And they funnel the same way, but these, instead of going left, they come right and they go right underneath me, and they go to persimmons and feed there for a while, and then made their way into the middle of the field. And that was about it with them. And then about an hour later, here comes another deer out of the middle of the field, and it was a weird looking buck. I couldn't really tell what it was. I could see it had horns on top of his head, but they were kind of bent together and then like mashed on the top of his head. It kind of looked like the rack folded into each other on top. So that deer never really got too close, got to about 70 yards and then peeled off and went out into the county piece. So now it's getting dark pretty quick, and out of the center ditch in the field behind the persimmons, I see a red fox come running out. So when we used to do deer drives, I was always taught, like, if you see a red fox, usually what's following a red fox is a buck. So I'm looking where the red came out. Now it's like the woods came alive. Here comes deer. They're all feeding towards the persimmons. I got does underneath me. Here comes two little bucks. They start fighting. And behind the persimmons I see legs coming. And I'm trying to look through all the briars and stuff. And I just see one deer just standing there like a monster. Big body. And he turns his head and I just see high tines. And I knew it was him right away. So now I'm getting nervous. I got the gun all set up, the GoPro's on a limb, and he starts moving towards the persimmons. He gets to the persimmons and he makes a left, and he lowers his head to the little bucks, and they just stopped what they were doing right away and just looked at him and then started following him across the field. So now he's pulling all the deer and the does, and they're walking towards the only opening that I have off to my left. So I get the gun set up on the opening, and they're about 10-15 yards right away from the opening, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to shoot. This is going to be my opportunity. And they make a right and they hook around the honeysuckle and briars. So now I'm devastated. I think the night's over, and I'm not going to see him. It's getting dark fast. And out of the honeysuckle to my left, here comes one doe, and following her is this guy right here, and a couple other little bucks and stuff. So she decides to walk the edge of the briars and the honeysuckle. So she starts to go to the opening, and he's following her. So right as soon as she passes the opening, I get ready to shoot, and I put it on his front shoulder and I pull the back barrel first. Now usually with the 10, you shoot a deer and they drop. Well, he takes off, and now deer are scattering everywhere. So now through all the hangover limbs and everything, I'm trying to get a lead and swing it through, and I pull the next barrel, and I don't know. I'm nervous now. Deer were going all different ways. I lost sight of him, but a couple deer went out across the field going towards the persimmons and going to the middle ditch. So I'm following them, and all of a sudden I hear a crash. So my dad comes pulling up with the truck, and he's asking me if I got him. I have no idea. I'm shaking. I think I just blew the only opportunity at a nice buck. And so I hurry up, get down, load the gun up, and I'm going straight across the field to where I heard the crash. I'm not looking for blood or anything. So I'm heading right for the center ditch. And I'm starting to get into real thick briars and high grass. And there's a couple patches kind of like a hassock, and I'm going in and around these little hassocks, and I see a belly. So now I'm getting all excited, but I can't see what he looks like yet. His head is stuck in the grass. So I get up to him, I pull him out, and I just started laughing because I had no idea that he was this nice. And Mr. Jaggard came walking up behind me, and he's asking me like, oh, how is he? So I just lifted him up for him, and he had a few choice words that I can't say on tape, and it was pretty funny coming from an 86-year-old man. And so I'm telling him thank you and everything for letting us hunt there, and I start dragging him back to my dad. My dad pulled the truck up in the field, and he's sitting at the tailgate. So I'm dragging him back, and as I'm dragging him, I'm kind of hiding him behind me so he can't see. And he's trying to step to the side to see what I'm pulling. And I finally get up to him, and he's like, all right, what does he look like? And I stepped aside, lifted him up, and he almost collapsed. He was laughing. He came running over, almost tackled me, and gave me a big hug. And it was nice because we hunted 16 days, I think it was. So for it to finally pay off and get a nice buck like this, it was pretty cool. And to do it at a place that my family's hunted for 30 years was pretty nice. And Christmas came early that year.
Back in the day, it was a 6-gun and a 6-string. Man, that was country. And that's the way country still ought to be. It was live not taught, it was earned not bought. Had to put in the work to get to the top, let me tell you. what I think's really gone wrong. These days it's all wannabes singing someone else's songs. Everybody's doing the same